Michelle Hines, and I am happy to welcome you today to Learning Tuesdays. Please connect with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account Reading by Third. We always like to thank these Tuesdays with gratitude to our sponsors. Thank you so much to our enterprise funders, to our programmatic funders, to our individual donors, and to all of you for being with us here today. We also want to thank our Leo sustaining sponsors, and we would love for you to introduce yourself to us in the chat box. All attendees are participating today in listen-only mode. We'd love for you to post your questions in the Q&A box instead of the chat so that we will see them. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available to everyone afterwards. And we will also give you all of the terrific resources that are going to end up in the chat during this conversation in a follow-up email. Toward the end of this conversation, we will ask you to fill out a brief evaluation survey that we will post during the Q&A. We've got a lot of great upcoming events that we would love you to join after today, and you can see them here. On Tuesday, March 31st, M is for Marathon, Not Miracle, How Mississippi Achieved Literacy Success Through Smart Implementation, followed by a peer exchange and a learning loss recovery challenge on Tuesday, April 7th. Again, we would love to see you there. And now I'm really pleased to hand this over to Sierra Sanchez, who's already introduced herself in the chat, our program associate, the person you usually see as our senior webinar producer every week. Sierra, please introduce everyone to this terrific session. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, and thanks to everyone who's hopping on and joining us. It's great to see so many of you in the room already. I won't give away too many numbers, but we're already up there. So really appreciate everyone here. I am so excited to see everyone here in the room with us today for today's webinar, Identifying and Preparing Scholarship Granting Organizations, or SGOs, co-supported by the Alliance for Youth Thriving as part of our webinar series, Leveraging the Federal Education Tax Credit, Opportunities and Challenges. I am very excited to be able to continue this important conversation with all of you today with an expert panel on deck. As a reminder, this webinar is the third in the series that we launched back in December, tasked with unpacking some of the opportunities and challenges of the federal education tax credit. The past two webinars, both of which I will link to in the chat, have been met with incredible interest as members of our community work together with advocates, policymakers, organization leads, and community members to ensure that this tax credit can do what we all agree is the number one priority of supporting our students. Today's panel and discussion will dive into what it means to be a scholarship granting organization, or an SGO. In our last webinar, we had a number of attendees who signaled a little bit of confusion and also some interest at digging deeper into what SGOs are, how they function, and how they might be involved in this new tax credit. Thankfully, we have gathered a phenomenal panel today to help us answer some of those questions and to deepen our understanding. With that, I'm excited to briefly introduce our panel for today's discussion. Donna Cooper is Executive Director at Children First PA. Prior to Children First, Donna was a senior fellow at the respected national think tank, the Center for American Progress, where she led the center's research on early childhood education and public infrastructure. Jack Lee Guglielmo is Vice President of Senior Services at ACE Scholarships, where she leads strategy and implementation for programs and products designed to expand access for high-quality educational opportunities for families. Previously, she served as Executive Director of Indiana's Education Scholarship Account Program within the Office of the Indiana Treasurer of State. Chris Smith is President and Executive Director of Boston After School and Beyond. Under his leadership, Boston After School and Beyond has developed a nationally recognized model of summer learning that improves student outcomes, built a citywide program performance measurement system, and cultivated a network of more than 500 programs serving more than 20,000 students. We also have Mike Taylor, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Association of Education Foundations, the only national membership organization dedicated exclusively to supporting and advancing pre-K through 12 education foundations. Brent Wake is also with us, and he is the Senior Vice President of Engagement at the Indiana After School Network, where he leads efforts to strengthen out of school time as a key part of the broader learning and youth development ecosystem. His work focuses on building partnerships across education, government, community, and workforce sectors to expand high quality opportunities for young people. And moderating what is sure to be a great conversation is Marita Irby, who is the co-founder and managing partner of the Alliance for Youth Thriving, a coalition of coalitions across education, youth development, and career pathways dedicated to strengthening learning ecosystems so that all youth can thrive. And with that, I will pass it over to Marita to get us started.
Thank you, Sierra, and thank you, truly, Sierra, for all the work that you've done over the entire series to bring us all together and along with Ralph and the team there at Campaign for Grade Level Reading, really kind of create a space to explore together. And that's what we're going to continue doing today because we've found in this whole conversation around the tax credit, there is a lot of like specifics that are out there and a lot of crystal ball reading as folks are trying to figure out where this is going to go. And just looking for a space to actually understand more of the details and make meaning together. So I do encourage folks, if this is your first, go take a look back at those first two webinars where you had a lot of really rich conversation of just what both is this and what are the decisions that folks are thinking through at the state level, whether their state would be participating or not, how this would play out. What I'm going to do to get us going today is just a quick kind of top notes on what the education tax credit is. It was passed back in July as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. First year of implementation would be 2027. And it really is kind of an interesting thing because it's a dollar for dollar tax credit up to 1,700 for contributions that folks would make to, and here's the theme of the day, scholarship granting organizations. What are these scholarship granting organizations? They've been operating in many states, not in all. So what does it really look like? I think it's 17 states currently. But what's that going to look like as it really comes to play with the federal tax credit? Especially since, as we talked about in depth in our last conversation, governors really must decide on an annual basis whether to opt in with their states. And so far, I believe, latest numbers I've heard is 23. This is an evolving story. So if we back up just one second, I do want to just emphasize one of the things that we're hearing a lot of conversation about, a lot of things that folks are saying is like, well, we think these things are included, or these may be included. Are we going to have more guidance? And what is this going to look like? And yes, the grapevine is saying probably early summer to hear more from Treasury about some of the specifics. But I just wanted to pop in here what the Education and Treasury fact sheet said specifically about what these scholarships can be used for. For any qualified education expense, we hear a lot of conversation around that, of an eligible student, which includes a broad set of expenses incurred in connection with or required by any K-12 public, private, or charter school. There's been a lot of talk about what does this mean to have scholarship granting organizations expanding to support public school students. And the kinds of things, again, this is language from the fact sheet, things like tuition for students to attend private schools of choice, tutoring at public schools, and support services for students with disabilities. There are many other kinds of things that folks have been seeing in related terminology, and so I'm just going to emphasize some of the things from the fact sheet, things like equipment or uniforms for a career training program at a secondary school, tutoring. We've been hearing a lot from the tutoring folks actually wrapping their heads around this as well. And I'm going to share a slide from a recent working group meeting that they had that in just a moment. After school enrichment programs, but also hearing, and does after school, does that include summer? So there's some things that folks are still wanting to get more clarity on, but what could this look like? And in the conversations around this has really led to this conversation of is it, I'll kind of go back to the first webinar that we had when we were teeing up and thinking about kind of a narrow path, sort of vouchers only for tuition, for example, or a broader ecosystem path that would include some of these other kind of experiences and supports that we know are so critical to the learning that really does happen everywhere in our communities. And how do we really think about this, while many have said on previous calls they wouldn't have written this legislation or written it this way, or didn't advocate for it. We've also had folks who have supported this legislation. But in all the conversations we've been a part of, it's really been but it's going to be a shift, no matter how you're thinking about it. This broader kind of opportunity to think about the broader learning ecosystem is one of the key shifts in thinking, in addition to the broader thinking about then, public school students and how they are able to benefit. Let's go to the next one here for just a second, because I mentioned that a lot of folks are having conversations around this. We were kind of working on this webinar to be a place where multiple folks could come, coalitions and networks, and then also we know that there's some other kind of sessions and working groups and cohorts that people are part of. And I shared this slide with permission from a working group meeting a couple of weeks ago from the folks at Partnership for Student Success and the National Student Support Accelerator and Accelerate, really coming together around what could this mean for tutoring. And I thought it was interesting, just in a very straightforward way, how they laid out the idea of, okay, they're going to be donors, right? Taxpayers contributing $1,700 a year, and then being able to claim all of that, not just as like to claim up the full 1,700 as dollar for dollar on their tax credit, that would go to the SGOs, who would pool the donations and then be able to grant scholarships to the families that are eligible for them, and be specific about what they're giving those scholarships for. Then families would receive those scholarships for qualified expenses, and those are the things that we just noted, that we also want to get more clarity on what's included in those qualified expenses, that then those funds would go to then people who are delivering services to our children and youth. And so just a simple kind of picture on that, but the conversation that I've been hearing so much interest in is, well, what really are those scholarship granting organizations? And should I become one? How do I explore this? Let's look at the next slide here for just a minute. And these are just top notes. We'll hear more detail on this as we get through the conversation today. But scholarship granting organizations, as far as we understand these things now, is that they are nonprofits, tax exempt, not a private foundation. They should provide scholarships to 10 or more students in at least 2 schools, so not just connected to one school. That they would spend at least 90% of the income on scholarships. And this has been one of the big things that folks are looking for more clarity around. We'll hear about that some in the conversation. That they provide scholarships only for those qualified education expenses, and that they be included on the list that's submitted by their state, should their state opt in, for the applicable year. There's even more specifics potentially around that, but those are the top notes. And so today on the call, before we just start pulling folks up on screen, you can start, our panelists start joining us, if you will. We really were excited, and this really was informed by the last conversation we had of the idea that people are really exploring this. And there's also folks who've already been in the business of providing these scholarships at the state level. And there are also states that have had scholarship granting organizations as part of their world for a while, and can talk a little bit about both what's happened and what are things to maybe think about in this next phase. The conversations folks have been having about kind of quality and guardrails, and how do we make sure that this is really something that's fair as it rolls out in different states across the country, especially in states maybe that haven't had it before and are thinking about it, as well as ones that have had it and have some really strong mechanisms already in place. So your rockstar panel today, we decided we would get somebody who's really thinking about this at the local level. That's Chris with the Boston After School and Beyond. Somebody thinking at the state level, Brent with Indiana After School Network. That's national level in terms of an association. That's Mike with the National Association of Education Foundations. And then in terms of the doing it for a while, we've got Jackie with ACE Scholarships, looking at how to take a lot of the infrastructure they've already developed around ESAs and other and think about how to be able to support a range of partners who are thinking about this with kind of sort of backroom supports. And then Donna's going to talk to us a little bit about just what this has been looking like not just what it's looked like, but what that means in terms of the conversations for now and next in a state like Pennsylvania. So we're going to kind of round robin through that conversation. And Chris, why don't you we're going to do it. This is the 1 minute, 2 minute round, guys. This is tell us who you are, where you are, and kind of the footprint, kind of the view and your partners in this conversation. And then we'll get into the nitty gritty. So Chris, can you kick us off?
Great. Thanks, Marita. My name is Chris Smith. I'm Executive Director of Boston After School and Beyond, and we mobilize after school and summer learning for Boston students. Practically, that means working with 527 after school and summer programs who collectively serve 23,000 kids, or about a quarter of the school age population in Boston. And what we have done is developed a common measurement and improvement system to harness the diversity of approach in the city. So it's K-12, it runs the gamut of activities and geography, as you can see on the map, from the Boston Harbor to the Blue Hills, and community nonprofits, college campuses, even workplaces in between. Structurally, though, we're an intermediary, so we're about a $6.42 million budget. We re-grant roughly two-thirds of that to those programs. And we spend over 90 cents on every dollar on those programs in terms of grants or training and evaluation to help them get better together. I should say that this is our 20th anniversary, and over the past decade or so, we've made some progress in informing public policy. So now at the local level, the Boston Public Schools has reinvented summer learning through what's the fifth quarter of learning, and I would argue some of the best enrichment in the country combined with academics, which has been proven to get great results for kids. And additionally, the state has followed suit and is funding summer and after school learning with the same measures we use. So they're looking at skills such as critical thinking, teamwork, communication, perseverance, all well recognized and appreciated, but not often measured. We actually measure them across all the programs and learn from one another on how to get better. And I'll save for the next round of questions. We found ourselves in this discussion in a Boston Globe editorial last September. Just because the Republicans passed it doesn't make the new federal scholarship program a bad idea. Well, I'll leave it off from there, but we have some considerations as an intermediary. I did want one note. You probably know an organization like us. We're part of the Every Hour Counts national group, which includes about 40 local and regional intermediaries who play a similar role.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks for highlighting that connection of as folks are listening in this conversation today, we want you to kind of look for who you think might be a counterpart, who's approaching this conversation from a similar perspective, or somebody that you might want to connect with as you move forward. So having a sense of those local intermediaries in the after school space really helpful. And now moving to the state level, Brent, tell us who you are and where you are.
Glad to. So thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit today. My name is Brenton Wake. I serve as the Senior Vice President of Engagement for the Indiana After School Network. As with Chris's organization, we are an intermediary serving all organizations across the state of Indiana who serve youth in the out-of-school time space, before school, after school, summer programming. The organizations we serve range from well-known organizations like Boys and Girls Clubs and YMCAs to child care home providers. We serve those organizations primarily through three avenues. One is advocacy at both the state and the federal level. The second is focusing on continuous improvement of program quality. And then the third is connected to working with them and communities and policymakers to increase access for Hoosier youth to out-of-school time programs. Our partners in this work are the National After School Association, the Mott Foundation through the 50 State After School Network, After School Alliance on the advocacy front. And we partner with a number of organizations throughout Indiana as well. Perhaps most significantly is our primary funder, the Lilly Endowment, and then the Indiana Office of Early Childhood Out of School Learning and the Indiana Department of Education.
Thank you, Brent. Let's move to national. Mike.
Great, thank you. Yes, Mike Taylor, I'm CEO with the National Association of Education Foundations, and we're really looking at this as a way to help support those in the education foundation industry. I tell folks to think of us as the research and development arm of our public schools across the country. We support more than organizations supporting more than 20 million students nationwide. And as an organization that provides professional development and support and technical assistance to our members, we've been involved at a national level in conversations that as this moves forward, we want to make sure that public school students are able to receive just as much benefit from this and from this funding. And so our conversations have been with legislators in Washington, but then also in partnership with After School Alliance and AASA, the Superintendent's Association, to look at ways that we can come together and also help in developing some toolkits for rolling this out. So we're really looking at this as a way to help support our folks at the local level across the country, helping with guidance, toolkits, and information that can help make sure that they're successful and making sure that it really can have the biggest impact for our students, especially when we look at communities where states may not opt in. What can we do to help folks at that level and make sure that students, again, can still take advantage of the funding? So
That's
I'll turn
terrific,
it
Mike.
back to
Thank
you.
you. And I really
Mhm.
will, and I really want to loop back on kind of the like the toolkits and
Yes.
how you things across like states thinking about it in your association. So we'll have a chance to kind of loop back on that. I think
Great.
next we have Donna.
Hi, I'm Donna Cooper. I'm the Executive Director of Children First, and we are located in Pennsylvania, where for about since 2014, we've had a very robust state tax credit program for scholarships and related activities that you hear about later. We're a multi-issue child advocacy organization, so you would think about us as connected to groups like Partnerships for America's Children. Or the Center for Law and Social Policy. We work at the federal, state, and local level on policy, and we do advocacy. And we have also been recipients of state tax credits because we work specifically in improving instruction in schools as well. And we have 25 years of experience in Pennsylvania debating tax credit policy and observing for the last 12 years the rollout of the tax credit policy in Pennsylvania that I look forward to sharing with you. But as our role in advocacy, we don't manage tax credits. We're not an SGO, but we have a lot of views about what it takes to be a responsible SGO and how to have a responsible tax credit program that offers a balance of opportunity for kids who are attending public school as well as those who are attending private or religious schools.
Fantastic. Thank you, Donna. And Jackie.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. Jackie Guillermo, Vice President of Services at ACE Scholarships. We are a scholarship granting organization. We are in our 26th year, so we have been doing this quite a long time. ACE historically has provided private scholarships to students as well as administering four tax credit, state tax credit programs in four states. So we are in our 26th year of impact and amazingly are up to delivering over $395 million in scholarships to students across 13 states. In anticipation of the federal tax credit, we have now established ourselves in all 50 states. And over the past couple of years in administering private scholarships, state tax credits, and education savings accounts programs, we made a significant investment in our technology in order to develop an end-to-end solution. And what we're offering, what we're thinking about, and how we're kind of coming to the table for the federal tax credit is we started to interact with a lot of different scholarship granting organizations, foundations, 501c3s, schools around the country, who were, as you guys articulated earlier, wondering what is this thing and what is it going to become and what's it going to look like. And so we decided to offer our technology at no cost to those organizations in order to maximize impact of the scholarship program. They
Jackie,
are
on the detail. Sorry, everything you're doing. I want to give you time to kind of unpack that. So we're going to get into the more like what have you been doing in kind of the next phase of the question, if that works for you. Is that okay?
No problem.
So because I think that's just like where people are going to start taking notes, right? And we need a chance to do that. So we're going to come off of the deck here for just a minute because it's kind of where Jackie was already taking us in this conversation is what for the folks who are participating, watching today, and from what we heard in the last conversation, folks had a lot of questions. And so we wanted to get both the people who are really in the exploring phase of this, as well as ones who are already thinking about, well, here's how I could maybe adapt what I'm doing already. I'm already thinking like I give out grants in some way already. Maybe I can think about how to become a scholarship granting organization in my state or through my association. And then, as we said, or influencing how I pay out, or I've already been playing this role, right? So that's who you've got on the screen here with me. So for each of you, I want you to just consider this question. The tax credit doesn't kick in, until January, right? But there is a lot of, and we aren't going to have clarity on that crystal ball probably until sometime early summer. But you are not a shy set of folks, and you have not been just sitting waiting for next. You've all been doing some things to say, how do we get ready for this? And I would like you to speak a little bit about what you've been doing, either at the local, state, or the national level, over the last few months to really prepare for this near next future. And give us a sense as you do that at the angle that you're really approaching this from. Are you just kind of exploring what may be possible? Are you already thinking about adapting sort of infrastructure and resources that you have in play? Are you thinking about how to kind of really influence how this might be playing out in your state or in your network? So kind of what angle are you coming into this conversation with, and what have you been up to? And for here, we're going to mix it up a little bit. Brent, I would love for you to kick us off because I know you've been a part of kind of a cohort
Yeah.
of places actually exploring what it means to become a scholarship granting organization.
Yeah, no, again, thanks for the opportunity to share a bit about how we're approaching this in Indiana. So just a little bit of background to kind of illuminate that. At the Indiana After School Network, as I indicated earlier, we're not an SGO today. We came into this space because we saw ECCA as a potentially significant opportunity, not just for education broadly, but specifically for out-of-school time programs. So our posture from the beginning has been exploratory and diligence oriented. We're trying to understand what this could mean for the field of out of school time, for families, and for our role as a statewide backbone organization. So, what caught our attention early is that ECCA explicitly allows funding to flow towards supports like tutoring, after school, and summer learning. From our perspective, that's important because out of school time programs are already functioning as education support infrastructure. At the same time, we're really seeing strain in the field here in Indiana, rising staffing costs, programs reducing capacity, families losing access. So the question for us became, is this a pathway that could bring new sustainable resources into that system? And importantly, resources that are flexible and locally responsive. So to answer that, we've been doing a few things in parallel. First, we've been engaging at the state level, making sure that as Indiana was considering, it's now opted in, but as Indiana was considering opting into ECCA, that out of school time is clearly understood and appropriately included in how the program is designed. Second, we submitted federal comments focused on implementation, particularly around issues like the 90% expenditure rule and how organizations like ours could responsibly participate. And third, we're participating in the National Scholarship Granting Organization Accelerator Cohort, which is being facilitated by Yes Every Kid Foundation, so that we can really understand what it takes operationally, legally, and financially to function as an SGO. So that's been critical because this wouldn't be just a programmatic shift for us. It's fundamentally different business model. And so a few things. Do you want me to go into kind of maybe what we're learning or any of that, or hold off there?
Yeah, let's get everybody in of like what we're
Sounds
doing,
good.
and then we're going to have a more free flowing round to share additional thoughts and have questions for each other. Does that work?
Sounds good. I'll wrap it
Okay,
right there.
fantastic. And I have to say, everybody, this is an extraordinarily busy time to be having a webinar like this, and so even getting everybody all like in the conversation together, it's been extraordinary over the past week. But we'll have a chance to kind of mix it up in just a minute. Mike. Can you
Yes.
tell us next what you're doing in across the association and I think in particular I hear that focus on public education students, making sure that they're really fully able to benefit from this. And I know part of the conversation we had as well was that's focusing on schools and how do you think about the kind of broader learning ecosystem within that and the role that your member foundations could play.
Yes, and I think part of that is we really want to see as broad a path of support as possible, right? Including summer, pre-K, and a variety of other things that, right? We saw some things early in the slide that we know it supports, but ensuring that there are a variety of other things that help support students. And many of our members are providing similar type of support now to support students with credit recovery and funding for other things. So we see this as a way to expand that. And so part of our work is looking at what's happening in the legislation, providing some toolkits that show how to stand up, uh, the work specific to scholarship granting organizations, and then continuing that conversation with legislators to make sure that it does give favorable opportunities for our public school students to participate as well. And so really we see it as an opportunity to expand that funding at the local level. A lot of our superintendents are telling us they're going to encourage educators to contribute to their foundation or scholarship granting organization, their community. The conversation I've heard is, right, this is part of your tax liability. You can direct it, locally to support students in your local community, and meet the obligation you have with IRS. So we're hearing a lot from our public school folks to say yes, they should participate and be involved in this because we really see the opportunity this can bring for students. So we're going to be very focused in the short term once we see that guidance coming back from Treasury on, what do folks need to do? How does that work? And at the same time, in local communities, if foundations are serving in this role as a scholarship granting organization, then how can other providers in the community then, right, participate with an education foundation, right? We've talked about Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, and others. How can they take advantage of the funds? Because often education foundations are the convener and conduit for funding in their local community. So we're sending that out to help for tutoring, credit recovery, and so on with other providers locally.
You're in so many communities, like there's the big brand names, Boys and Girls Club and Wise, but you also, your local foundations know who the other community-based providers are. So it gives a kind of a
They do.
connection in there. One thing I don't think I said in the opening is this is the third in the series, but the idea was to keep the series going around things like, what is the mobilization once we get more guidance? What's the mobilization around this? What's the communications? Depending on how things might play out in different places. And I think that what even like, do you encourage people to contribute? What does that look like? And what is that being a part of some of these larger networks, how would that play in terms of just the communications around this? So it's definitely things to dive into in even greater depth once we have more clarity.
Yes.
So let's see, let's go next actually to Jackie. If you can say, because partly like we just wanted to mix up the conversation from folks who are thinking about and exploring to somebody who's been doing for a while. And then Donna will go to you in terms of things to think about as it plays out in different states. So Jackie, back into so what have you been doing? Because I know it's been a lot, and also connecting with counterparts on this as well, the other folks that you're networking with. So can you paint out the picture, hearing these kinds of questions and conversations people are exploring? What have you been doing as somebody who's been in this space for a while?
Yeah, it's been a busy couple of months since this passed for sure. So a couple of things that we've been doing. One is participating in a national coalition of other scholarship granting organizations, and that's really done two big things for us. One, it's put us in contact with other SGOs, both at the state level and at the national level, to talk about implementation best practices and interpret what the provisions of the law actually mean and what they look like in kind of operational procedure based on how we have been operating as scholarship granting organizations for 2 decades. The other thing it does is puts us in direct contact with the U.S. Treasury. So we have been working directly with the Treasury to provide guidance on scholarship granting organization operations, right? Our typical course of business, our interpretation of the law, and providing it's been very encouraging how eager they are for our input because they understand that they're not a scholarship granting organization and they really want to understand how they work so that they provision rules that are, decrease barriers for entry and make for very smooth implementation. So that's a big thing that we've been doing. The other thing is connecting with state administration, so governor's offices, secretaries of state who may not have a state tax credit program and are not familiar with scholarship granting organizations and how they work or how implementation might work. So we are working with both the administration, as well as scholarship granting organizations that may exist in other states as they look toward expansion and making this program accessible for their communities. In addition to what I was touching on before is building an infrastructure that really, the point of which is coming alongside the efforts of scholarship granting organizations. And, many people have spoken on this call in communication with organizations that are thinking about becoming an SGO, but are not quite sure how that looks. And we're trying to, again, really just get more money in the hands of more kids and decrease a lot of that administrative burden by building a platform that can support any type of organization in accessing these funds.
Thanks. Let's get Donna in and then we can come back. I think you had a slide that was a little bit more detailed on the infrastructure questions, which folks I think might find useful to see when you start getting down some layers into this. Donna, what have you been up to? Again, I know it's a lot.
Yeah, so first of all, Pennsylvania's been at this for a while. We are foregoing about $600 million of state revenue and tax credits right now, the bulk of that being for enrollment in parochial and private schools. When this tax credit program started, it was 25 million in 2022, and it's now over 600 million. The lion's share of that growth has been, as I just said, Sierra, if you could go to the next slide. This is next slide, yeah. That's the
And this is kind of looking at what's already happened in the state that's kind of informing how you're
I'll
thinking
describe
about
it, yeah.
forward.
So the dark blue is the bar is the amount of state tax credits available for attending private and parochial school for any kid. And these are corporate tax credits. And then the blue at the top are targeted tax credits for kids who are in underachieving school districts. But what you can see is that the lion's share of growth is enabling kids to attend non-public schools. And then the yellow and the green, they kind of look the same, are funds for pre-K scholarship and then education improvement organizations, which would be the kinds of groups that Boston Beyond and Indiana have talked about. And one of the things that we've been doing is talking with our partners across the state about the opportunity that getting our state law ready for the federal law, should the governor opt in, might be appropriately handling the ratio. Like, do we have an inappropriate ratio here in terms of the share of tax credits that are available in PA for education improvement organizations, tutoring, after school summer, compared to those that are available for kids who are enrolling in non-public school options and also pre-K. We're also talking about the fact that this growth was actually fueled by the amount of money that came off the top. We in PA had a 20% capture, that the nonprofits or the for-profits that were running this could keep 20%. So when you're 600 million and you have 20%, that's a lot of money. It was recently reduced to 10%, but that means there's $50 million here that is being used. And by some extent, it's being used to administer programs, but it's also being used here to heavily influence lawmakers to increase certain parts of the bar chart. And so another thing we've been thinking about is what are the ways that we can protect from lobbying that would cause these ratios to be as out of whack as we would want them to be. The other thing is we don't have tracking mechanisms, and I'm not sure what the federal law is going to require for tracking mechanisms. Obviously, it will require that we track the income, but we want to track the impact. And we want to have some kind of public reporting on what this looks like between the use of the federal tax credit and the state tax credit. So another part of what we're talking to folks about is what is the appropriate tracking for impact and utilization across the different types of programs within the income range, without the income range, and how do we use that to drive for good policy? Our governor has not opted in yet. He has said he's waiting for the Treasury guidance, but we know that we have a much weaker infrastructure in the pre-K and the tutoring after school summer space in terms of influencing policy than we have in the infrastructure that is available to influence the political environment that's going to set our state rules for what an SGO are under the federal law, with an imbalance in that political infrastructure that we're trying to think about how to address.
Yeah. So we're hearing a lot of things around like what is it going to take to do this? And the infrastructure is around things like how do you actually, operate as a scholarship granting organization, but there's the broader kind of milieu in which this is happening. And so I'm hearing you talk about like how do we kind of balance out the picture, and in terms of things around influence and advocacy, and also hearing, and in other conversations, just the importance of being able to mobilize folks in communications and just, make something that we've spent, months now wrapping our heads around really clear in terms of options and paths, both for the taxpayers and for families. So a lot to wrap our heads around here, and I'm curious, this as we kind of turn to more of the what are the opportunities? What are the things to kind of, help shape or guide, hopefully going forward and how this plays out? If Jackie can just loop back with you and you just say a little bit more on the nuts and bolts infrastructure piece, because I think that that's one of the things I'm hearing from a lot of places, and what I'm hearing is there could be many different scenarios in terms of how this plays out, but folks actually saying, well, maybe I should become one, Brent, like the thing that the cohort you're a part of, what would it take to develop this functionality? And then part of the, it's like, or could we like partner to that functionality? Could be another path, or could we association our way through to that. So I'm just curious, Jackie, if you could share a little bit. And I think we've got a slide here too, about some of the nuts and bolts. And if we go there, the other yellow one, back up one more. Okay. We're in round two, everybody, just in case you're trying to keep track with where we are in the conversation. So nuts and bolts on this a little bit. What from where you sit, what could this look like?
Absolutely. And to take a half a step back, this business model really it came out of a lot of conversations that we were having in those coalition meetings. So we were talking with smaller scholarship granting organizations. We were talking with organizations that, as they stood today, were not eligible for participation because they were for-profits or foundations. And they said, we really want to be able to maximize this federal tax credit. But thinking about what we would need to do to become a scholarship granting organization, to establish ourselves as a 501c3, to register for charitable solicitation, to maintain legal and regulatory compliance. It's just very overwhelming. And these conversations really started at the tail end of last year before any states have opted in. Now, fast forward, we're 28 states in. But really, some of the maybe purple states were thinking, well, what if my governor doesn't opt in and I go ahead and scale my operations? And so from that, we really thought about the infrastructure that we had built, the experience that we had had, and said, we really feel like it's our duty to come alongside these organizations and really empower them to be able to take advantage of these funds. So to talk about nuts and bolts, so these are the legislative requirements of a scholarship granting organization. As we all know them today, this is what is required by law. Obviously, we've mentioned a couple of times, the U.S. Treasury will promulgate some rules, so more to come on that. But when we think about everything a scholarship granting organization is tasked to do under state level tax credit, let alone federal tax credit, which is new for all of us at 10% maximum overhead. 20% seems like a dream data, right? That's a huge amount of money. We operate a state tax credit where we're only allowed to retain 5%. So we have done it on a tight budget. And as a charity navigator, for top 4-star rated organization for 11 years. So we really know what goes into delivering scholarships. And so decided to create this end-to-end technology. And really what that means is everything that any entity would need to administer the federal tax credit, from their receipt of donations from a donor and marketing to donors, right? The traditional definition of a donor is changing for scholarship granting organizations. We are no longer talking about high net worth individuals that give a one-time gift of a very large amount. We are talking about Joe taxpayer, as I like to say, right, at a $1,700 maximum. And you may not be working with folks that are necessarily mission aligned, that are really passionate about school choice. It may just be somebody that's really interested in getting a tax credit and redirecting their federal tax liability. And so thinking about the marketing strategy that goes into that. So these are all components of an end-to-end solution that ACE offers. So we receive the donations, we process those for the organization. And I like to call this a co-branded white label, right? Because this is not about ACE. We've done this for a really long time. This is about about empowering, being the back end of an organization that really wants to be able to do this, wants to maintain relationships with their community, with their donors, but just needs a more robust infrastructure to be able to do so. And that's what ACE is providing. So the receipt of the donations, the processing of those donations, the delivery of the documentation that taxpayer would need to claim the tax credit, the determination of eligibility for a student, the selection of those students for award, the provisioning of an individualized account whereby a student can then decide what schools or programs or materials they want to be able to purchase with those funds. And an important shift that ACE has made recently in anticipation of the federal tax credit is being able to provide scholarships to both students who are educating in the private schools as well as the public schools. So we are exploring partnerships with a lot of different organizations like tutoring organizations or after school programs that, again, we're thinking about becoming an SGO and say, well, gosh, if you guys can do this for me and I still maintain my relationship with my community and my name on the top of this, then really it's a win-win-win solution.
Thank you for running through the details on that in terms of the kinds of things you're doing. Some of this is it's things you've already, building on what you've had, but really building things out as you're thinking about time to come. So as we bring it back kind of to full screen with everyone, one of the things I'm hearing in Jackie and what you're talking about, and Mike as well, is how do I take some existing capacity and think about this broader say the ecosystem path, kind of the broader learning ecosystem as a part of it, and the emphasis with kind of the public education students as well as those who've been private and parochial schools. And so how to be able to think about that in terms of the partnerships. And so I'm just, opening this up for conversation as you all are thinking about what this is kind of sparking for you in terms of opportunity, in terms of what might be possible, in terms of, Brent, you're in this kind of learning cohort right now, in terms of what looks doable, what looks scary, what looks like, something is could really help take your work to the next level versus maybe not play out in the way that you're hoping to. I'm just curious what's on your minds right now as you're thinking about what it's going to take to, as we look to the next 8 months, what it's going to need to be ready for 2027 in terms of your own prep and adaptation for this work. And I'm tossing it up. Anybody who wants to come off, what's this sparking for you? Donna, Brent, I see you both off mic. Who wants to go first?
Donna, you go first.
Well, I do hope people will, across the sectors, particularly the youth improvement sectors, work together, because I do envision that the traditional players in particularly the Catholic Conference in your states will be very well organized. And that's fine. I'm not begrudging them. I'm just saying that in order for citizens in your state to make a decision to support the organizations that will help public school kids succeed, they're going to need to know about you who are doing that. And you're going to know that best if people are collaborating and using their resources together to market to citizens, to solicit tax credits, to have easy to use tax credit platforms where everybody can do this together, not 9,000. So, I just hope people will be strategic and recognize that partnerships are going to, in my mind, enable the greatest number of funds to go to kids who remain in public schools. That's my angle here.
Thank you, Donna. And it's an angle, and it's also one I'm hearing on everybody's mind. It's like this is, even if it's been in one kind of mode, it's like how are we really broadening this out and just making sure that it's fair across the board. Brent, what's on your mind here?
Yeah, you asked kind of what's scaring us or what's standing out to us. There's a few things. I'll tell you that the 90% rule and compliance structure are real constraints, especially for organizations with broader missions. And this work is operationally intensive, right? Governance, compliance, fundraising, distribution, all have to be built with rigor. So for us, this isn't something that you step into lightly. So at this point, we're intentionally keeping optionality. I mean, We see two viable paths. One, partnering with existing SGOs that want to meaningfully support out of school time, or exploring whether a direct SGO role could make sense for us in the future. But we haven't made that decision, and that's intentional. So our focus right now with all of this is making sure the policy framework works well for Indiana, making sure out of school time is positioned within that framework, and that we fully understand what it would take to do this work. So it's a significant opportunity for us, but it's complex, and we're organizations like ours. The question isn't just can we do this, but it's should we, and would it strengthen the system if we did? So that's the lens that we're using as we continue this work.
Yeah, I'm curious on the can we, should we. I'm curious, and Chris, I know this relates to conversations we've been having too, of what are you hearing from your counterparts, or what are you hearing, Brent, from the other folks that are in that cohort? It's like there are a lot of details, but um, is the juice worth the squeeze? We've been talking about a lot, making lemonade in these calls, but is the juice worth the squeeze from where you sit? So what are some of the, just take it down a layer for me in terms of what are some of the considerations that you're trying to think through in terms of whether you actually would try to become one versus partner?
Yeah. Our conversations have been decidedly if, not whether this should happen. I mean, when this broke, we did work with, had conversations with other cities and every hour counts and submitted recommendations during the open window in December that said, let's make after school and summer explicit. And if you're talking about educational opportunities, there's probably no better bang for your buck and nothing better researched than summer and after school. So let's make sure that's clear. Just not to repeat, but reiterate the 90% issue. If it's 90% of the organization's revenue, we couldn't be an SGO, but if it's of a program, certainly. But we quickly shifted to if the governor opts in. Our governor's not yet opted in. Don't know if she will. We're not advocating one way or the other. But if she opts in, we don't want to be caught flat-footed. We want to make sure that we're positioned to ensure that the kids we work with now, the overwhelming majority of whom are high need, just in the public schools, when you look at English learners, kids with special needs, low income, that they benefit from this, and that the programs who serve them benefit from this. I showed you the chart. We work with 527 programs and 23,000 kids. We have incredible data on all of them, exactly how much they attend, where, how good the programs are, in what ways, where they can do better, and where they are relative to other programs. So for us, should this pass, should we become an SGO, we would want to maintain a high sense of program performance so that kids are served well. And we don't want to just be a transfer of funding. When you look at whether we should become an SGO, I mean, we are a GO. We regrant over $4 million a year to hundreds of programs. The S part of that, the scholarship, would necessitate that we get to know donors and families better. So those are the considerations, and they're all premised on if the governor opts in, then we want to be ready in these ways. And I would say many of our counterparts are in the same way. I mean, we worked with Every Hour Counts, worked with Penn Hill Group to shape the recommendations, which I think represent where we stand, that they should be explicit about after school and summer, given the substantial evidence around them and the need. I mean, there's huge unmet demand that is very well documented. So, ideally, if we opt in and revenue develops, then it should be spent in a way that's smart to serve kids who need it in ways that are accountable.
Yeah. Thanks. And that question of quality and accountability is just a recurring theme, I think, of these conversations. Donna, I see that hand. And Brent, I think you were also about to chime in. So, Donna, why don't you
just
give us the
on
thought, we'll look back to Brent.
juice worth the squeeze. I mean, as much as I'm arguing that this is a great risk in terms of where money's going for the private and parochial schools, and away from the kids that need the resources the most, in my mind, or the proven strategies that get kids to to get achievement. In PA, with our tax credit program, there's 30 million that's set aside for pre-K and 70 million set aside for education improvement organizations like the groups here. So when Chris says they're spending 4.5 million, like this is a mega expansion of that through the tax code. So the juice is worth the squeeze in my mind if, as Chris said, we can figure out how to get to individual taxpayers and get them to make that contribution. To me, that's the biggest challenge. Platform is great, but the marketing to beat out the other folks who are going to be driving money to these other settings, which I do see, by the way, as competitive, others may not. That's really going to be the challenge. But it's a lot of money. Nobody can argue that $100 million going for traditional services that get public school kids on a good trajectory is chump change.
Yeah, and that figure you're talking about is the state level. I mean, I'm hearing up to like 50 billion. I mean, there are different estimates depending on how many taxpayers opt in, right? But that's a whole lot of juice.
Yeah.
So it's the juice may be getting squeezed, and where does it flow? Is I think part of what the conversation is. I'm not getting it all in order. Brent, I know you came off mic first because you and Chris were about to go. So you get Brent, you're in next, and then I think it's Jackie and Mike. Go,
Okay.
go, go.
Yeah, so I'll say, yeah, I definitely agree with Donna that I think it is worth it when you think about the kids that'll benefit and the influx of resources to states. I think the challenge for us, you asked, kind of dig deeper. What are some of the things that we're considering, on another level? And I think it's a balance of kind of reputation and risk, ability. So Indiana has opted in. So the question for us is no longer if this is coming, it's how we engage with it thoughtfully, and as we consider whether we should become an SGO, we're really working with a few things as we dig down deeper. The first is mission alignment. We are a statewide backbone organization, and we focus on strengthening the field, not delivering direct services. So we're asking, does operating as an SGO align with that role, or does it fundamentally change it? Because stepping into that role means managing funds, making scholarship decisions, all those things that come with it. The second is the operational reality. This is a significant lift. And as was articulated earlier, there's real requirements around governance, compliance, financial management, scholarship processes, and the expectation for that 90% of the funds to go to the scholarship. So we're asking, what would it take to build and sustain that infrastructure well? That's what we're exploring with the cohort I mentioned, not just to launch, but to operate with consistency and integrity over time. Third, and this is where your question is really getting, is that structure where we're actively thinking through whether this is something that could sit within IAN as it currently exists, or whether it would require a separate entity. Because when you look at the requirements and the scale of responsibility, there are real considerations around financial separation and accountability, governance and oversight, risk management, and maintaining clarity around our core mission. So one of the questions on the table is, would we need to establish a subsidiary or affiliated entity to do this well? And if so, what does that look like in practice, legally, operationally, strategically? And so that's something that we're working through with legal guidance right now. There's the state of implementation environment. Even with the state opting in, a lot still depends on how Indiana structures certification and oversight. Because certification is the gateway. If you're not approved, of course, you can't participate. So we're watching closely how that process develops and what it means for an organization like ours. There's already. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say there's already the issue that there are SGOs in Indiana, and so we're asking what do we actually add? Where do we actually add the most value? Is it becoming one ourselves, partnering, helping shape how the system works for the out of school time field? So we're focused on strengthening the ecosystem and not duplicating it. And then finally, for us, it's about field impact. At the end of the day, this is about whether this whole opportunity expands access to out of school time programming and supports programs and families. So we're asking, does stepping into the role lead to better outcomes for the field, or are there other ways that we can have greater impact? So there's a lot there that we're considering as we dig down into it, but we're taking a deliberate approach.
Yeah, and I think one of those, like, if there's one one note that on something that you said, that one of the things I'm hearing in a lot of the conversations is on the rules or the guidance, whatever comes out. How is it, how narrowly, what does it take to get on the list? And how much is it at the federal level going to be, well, if you qualify, you're on the list. In a state level, we can't, or versus, you could really have things at the state level that are defining, or choosing or being preferred or incentivized to be on the list. So what that means, I think, is something, another piece that people are really looking at trying to read the crystal ball at this point in time, but also really looking for if there's going to be clarity on that come early summer. Jackie?
I think you were first. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
I think
good.
you were first, Mike. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right, thanks. Now, well,
We're all
and
going to
I was
partner
just
our way
going
through this.
to add a little bit too, agreeing with Brent on some of this as well, is that compliance and accountability, right? Because one bad actor can spoil this for everyone. And so that is a concern, making sure folks understand the rules and are able to, right, that's clear and it's transparent. But I think the other option is to make sure that donors have options. They can see the organizations that are eligible and understand what's being supported, and to make sure that funding is getting back to support students where the greatest need is. We've talked a lot about after school and summer, and those are critically important in this, but making sure that one organization is not just receiving all the funds, right? And right, how is that getting dispersed, and is it being dispersed timely? Because the worst thing that could happen is folks are eligible to be an SGO, receive those funds, and it's not making its way back out to support students and ensuring that they're benefiting from that work. So I think some of those are the things that we're looking at, right? Have our eye on and concern on, and hoping there'll be some additional clarity on that. But it is really, I think, with some of that, making sure that the guidance that comes from Treasury this summer makes it clearer and not vague, right? And so some of those conversations that continue to have with legislators and others to say, let's make sure this is clear and understandable to folks, and donors feel good about it, and students ultimately do receive that benefit.
Yeah. And I think you and also Jackie, you're looking across multiple places as you're thinking about that. So it's going to be interesting to see like how that plays out. And a lot of our partner organizations are as well, networks. That's just thinking what this is. And I know the Q&A is lighting up, so I'm going to give the Q&A readers a heads up that we're going to come to you after Jackie. Just one thing I would also underscore, there's like, we're talking about scholarship granting organizations today, but what you're hearing in all of those stories and the questions and what you're exploring, there are multiple roles here for this to actually roll out well. All right. And so what I'm hearing is the if question is not like how to, if this is happening in my state, how to engage. It might be which format, which legal entity am I as I'm engaging in this, or what role and function am I playing? But there are a lot of for this major shift to happen, there is a lot of ways to help work and shape at your state and local level in terms of how this plays out. Being the scholarship granting organization is a key functionality that we're trying to understand, but it's not the only kind of player that's going to be in this space influencing how this all rolls out. Jackie.
Yeah. So first, absolutely want to underscore all the phenomenal points that both Brent and Mike made. Totally agree about the way that you're thinking about this. The one point I might add here is marketing and accessibility. And so as we were talking about with donors, right, this could be a gigantic program, but only if donors know about it. So, I am also from Indiana, Brent, I'm your neighbor. So, it's amazing. We have very robust school choice here, and a very small percentage of families actually know that we have a voucher, that we have an ESA program, that we have a state tax credit program. And so when you extrapolate that across the United States, it's amazing the percentage of eligible parents in every state that has these programs that don't even know that they're available to them. So that's going to be a huge hurdle, and something that we're very focused on. I mean, we're comfortable with operations, but certainly scaling marketing to a national level is something important to think about. Next, when I think about accessibility as somebody that's launched 2 education savings account programs, I think of families knowing what this is. They're aware that it exists. They're aware that their students are eligible, and they understand understand how to use these types of programs, the variety of eligible expenses that they can spend the funds on is a very complex topic, one that very familiar with. So helping families to find the application, work through the application, know what documentation they need to provide in order to determine their students eligible, having a platform that can do that in dozens of languages so that it's accessible for families regardless of where kind of what culture they're from or what language they speak. We understand that a lot of families lean on their community for support in that, right? So they might go to a church or a school that they're familiar with to help them through those sorts of things. So empowering local grassroots community organizations. We talked about all the different players, not just SGOs, that are going to be instrumental in the success of this initiative. And that's absolutely one of them, is these community members to help support the families that can take advantage of this program, and making sure that once their students are determined eligible, that they understand what they can use these scholarship funds for. Those of us who have been kind of in this space for a while and know the headlines all the time, this is not fraud, waste, and abuse. These are families just trying to understand how to use these scholarship funds and use them to make the most impact on their students' education. And with having such a wide variety of eligible expenses is an amazing opportunity, but can also be very overwhelming for families as they try to navigate these things. So having resources in place to support the families and ensure ease of use on a platform, I think, is going to be critical to success.
And this is one of the reasons, like our existing that like, how do I make sense of it? How do I tap into it? That's what so many of our existing networks have been doing. And I think this conversation that we've been having in the Alliance for Youth Thriving and throughout is just how do you actually, how is this an opportunity maybe of just bringing down some of the walls between education, out of school time, community-based youth organizations, and as you get into the high school years, the kind of the career workforce development pathways. There's a lot of kinds of things that are STEM networks, wonderful things that are happening in communities, but often are kind of work in their own lane. This potential and also what makes it a little bit scary, but the potential is like there's potentially a lot of funding that's flowing that could really help more young people access the things that are in their communities. There's also, what makes it less maybe scary to me is there's also a lot of infrastructure in many communities that are already tackling the connections with families and then with young people and trying to make these things comprehensible. So there's a lot of work to do together to figure out the best ways for this to play out. And there's also potentially a lot of different scenarios structurally of how this might play in different states or across states, right? Taxpayers can contribute even if it's not happening in their state. So there's those conversations underway as well. We've got, and I think that's one of the things I saw in the Q&A. We've got a lot of questions, just like how could this play in different scenarios and who's working on this, those kinds of things. But Sierra, I'm going to ask you to join us because I think this of all the conversations we've had, we probably have the most cues here. And I do think you have noted before, we will capture the cues and we can figure out and follow up how to share on some of the things as we go forward. But big themes or specific questions out of what you've been tracking in the Q&A.
Definitely. And I will say on that note as well, my colleague just messaged and said, even if we don't get to all the questions, it's great to know what people are thinking and are wondering and are asking about so we can use those for our future sessions. So if you haven't put a question in yet, I know the 20 minutes is going to go by fast, but please still feel encouraged to share any thoughts or questions because we will definitely take a look and kind of use that as we go forward. With that, though, let's dig into some questions that we hopefully will have some time for. I think, yes, like you said, we've got a lot of good things coming in. I think I'll just do a little bit of a rapid fire, and then if we need to slow down, we could do that. But I'll go from there. So, an anonymous attendee asked, if our governor doesn't opt in, how can our students benefit? I know that's a very open question, kind of a heavy lift there, but does anyone have initial thoughts on, okay, if we don't opt in, if our governor does not opt in, what are the next steps for our students? What does that look like? I think that's kind of what's on everyone's mind if we want to jump in there. Whoever wants to
Jump
take.
in really quick.
Jackie?
So, in establishing ourselves in all 50 states, an initiative that we're absolutely looking at is for those students who reside in states that have opted in, we'd be able to use federal tax credit funds to provide scholarships for those students. In states who reside in students who reside in states that have not opted in, we are hoping to be able to provide a lot of our private scholarship money to those students. And so we are encouraging partnerships in all 50 states, regardless of whether you think your governor may opt in or not. But it certainly gives us the possibility of opening up those privately donated funds to students who reside in those states. I mean, we're headquartered in Colorado. Governor Polis has opted in, which is amazing, but we are also established, have longstanding relationships in states that are likely not going to opt in. And so potentially that's a route that some scholarship granting organizations could go.
That's great.
So as a family, would I have to be going to participate in the program in the other state as you imagine it? I'm trying to make sure I'm following.
Ask me the question again.
So if it was not happening in my state, I've been hearing more that if it's not happening in my state, then my tax dollars might go to another state. But I think it's interesting, this question, if it's not happening in my state, would any of the students in my state be able to access those scholarship funds? And what you're describing is
not the federal.
Yeah.
Not the federal, but for scholarship granting organizations that are national, that are established in more than one state and happen to be established in states that don't opt in, they could certainly deliver if their privately raised funds are unrestricted, then they could provide those scholarships to students who reside in those states. They just can't use federally raised funds
for it, right? So there might be other things they can tap into as a part of the broader funding flows, but not the tax dollars. Okay. Sarah.
Yes. Okay. I think one of the next ones we can look at, oops, someone just put another question and it bumped it. Let's see. Okay. So this one just wanted to clarify on the timing a little bit more. Beth said, just want to picture the timing. If first year of implementation is 2027, could you provide what starts as early as January 2027? Will SGOs be live to receive donations right away, or do they apply to become eligible? What does that timeline look like, or at least what do we hypothesize that would look like? Unless we don't know. And that's
students,
okay.
that's my understanding. It's the year in which you actually can make the tax contribution to the SGO. I think one of the questions, and totally check me on this, folks that have been students of this more than I have, but that one of the questions is at least in the initial years, if there's already existing infrastructure that those organizations would be able to receive funds and start passing them out more quickly. And so the balancing out the picture kind of question that Donna was posing of would that take more, would that be more over time, or do things start flowing in existing structures, especially of states that already have them, and then it's harder to balance out the picture. So part of the question I've hearing people explore in terms of supporting kind of the across states of the broader ecosystem is what is the work of the next several months so that folks can kind of hit the ground running, or in places maybe that haven't had the programs before or are looking to kind of expand or balance out the picture. So that's my super layperson's thing, but I'm seeing a couple nodding heads, so maybe I got that one right. Okay, other questions?
Let's see. Okay, so someone here says, let's take a look. Oh, here's a good one. Okay, so someone said, what, if any, data exists on the learning outcomes of children whose parents choose school choice? With SGOs, the dollars leaving the public schools will have a dramatic impact on the education of children whose parents take advantage of this opportunity. So does anyone have any thoughts on kind of the school choice route and kind of what that would mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm happy to jump in and say it's one of those that this is coming. So I think from the perspective of our folks that are, supporting public schools, is to say we need to stand up and be ready to take advantage of this and put this into effect. Because, right, is it a gateway? Possibly. This isn't going to cover the full cost of someone to, attend private school. But I think from the standpoint of saying that our public schools recognize there are needs for students, especially in summer, after school credit recovery, and a variety of other areas, pre-K included, that they see the importance of being able to participate and take advantage of this as well. And Jackie, you may have some other suggestions.
Like,
one
I
of the
totally
things,
agree. I
sorry,
would
go
just
ahead.
add that with the federal tax credit, there is no funds leaving the public school. These are private donations that are being provided to scholarship granting organizations. This is not a state appropriation or a diversion of funds at all. It actually is going to support students who are enrolled in public schools to be able to obtain wraparound services or special education services or other materials that are only going to help assist their education in the public school. So I think that's really the beautiful thing about this new initiative and the structure that they've written into the bill.
Can I
It's one of the
can I
things
add
that,
one point
Donna,
about it?
go ahead.
Well, I agree with Jackie. The degree to which the contributions are made to private or parochial schools to enable children to go will likely have an impact on public school enrollment. So the money is not being diverted at the state level where schools are typically funded or the local level. But it certainly will increase the liquidity of the ability of the private and parochial schools to either cover the costs of kids who are already there that are income eligible or recruit new kids who are income eligible.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things, Mike, I know we've talked about just the idea of like the in the kind of future of education,
Right.
the schools as learning hubs kind of idea. And
Yes.
like, is this something that helps with the conversations you're already having with your association members about the kind of roles they play locally?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think, right, I think both of these comments right? Because while it's not taking away from the local allocation, it is if a student disenrolls, right? So I think that's where the point to say if it's coming, our public schools need to be prepared to, take advantage of that and support. And just as you mentioned, schools being a hub, there is a need for that additional support in the out of school time space in other areas that would also encourage students to stay in a public school because they're getting that additional support at that level as well.
Yeah. Sierra, maybe if we can fit in one more question. One thing I was looking at a lot of the questions is like, how could I find out more? And I think the like, how could I learn more about ACE? How could I find out more about this cohort that Brent's a part of? And is there something else like, are there other things like that? The toolkit, Mike, that you're putting together. So I think one of the things we are really trying to create sort of an ongoing space for people to learn together. And I know we'll be sharing things out after the webinar and putting the links and all those kinds of things in. So you will get a lot of, if you want to learn more, kinds of things. And then I think I'm just going to say to like, everybody on this call, if there's resources you have to share as we move forward with with Campaign for Grade Level Reading, Alliance for Youth Thriving, just broadly beyond that, we're going to keep trying to create a space where people can share across in terms of resources that help people navigate all of this. Donna, I see your hand up. So let's get your question or comment, and then Sierra, tell me if we
Yeah,
have time for one more question.
just quickly, because in the comment it said, how can the LEAs, the local education agencies, really take advantage of this? And I think it builds on the comment that Mike and Jackie were making, which is, look, 9 out of 10 school kids in America go to public schools. And so really, it's up to the public schools, if their governors opt in, to figure out the extraordinary reach into the communities. So there is an opportunity here. It's just that they don't have the wheels and the grease in their DNA to really take advantage of this. And so if that was your question, the real issue is how do you begin to get your state's public schools to understand they can be big winners in this, but it's going to take a tremendous change in how they operate.
And connecting in with partners such as yourselves across this screen, whether the local education foundations, the state or local after school networks. That's part of. I see like we've got United Ways on the call. Being able to say, okay, it's not all on the shoulders of schools alone to figure out how to navigate this. You've got some folks who are already thinking about this and in the game and could help in this conversation should this be coming your way. And maybe even make the local public school more important in terms of the role that it's playing because of these kinds of partnerships. Excuse me for just being so excited that I bounced my screen. Sarah, do we have time for any more questions?
Here's what I'm going to do. So there's a question that kind of loops in. It's a little focused on what Jackie was saying. So I'm going to use that question for Jackie as a little bit of a transition into next steps. So Jackie, I'll start with you and then if others want to share next steps. But for you directly, Jackie, someone or a few people actually are just wanting a little bit more in terms of clarifications on, oops. And now the question just jumped away from me. Where did we go? Well, I do recall, it was basically talking about, what would qualify as an SGO? What does that look like? What are the insights into how these SGOs are operating, how we can partner with them, how we can work with them, what that would look like. Oh, here it is. Now I can read it actually. How can we find current or future SGOs in our state who we may partner with if we were thinking about becoming an SGO, but would, as Jackie mentioned, partner instead? So I know that's a bigger question, but if you can start with kind of your thoughts, and then we'll switch to others as we do next steps and ideas.
Sure. So, of course, I know you guys will share contact information. Happy to sort of have a deeper dive with anybody about what is a scholarship granting organization, what does a partnership look like, how to be in touch with your local scholarship granting organizations or us. I think the most important thing is reading through the provisions of the law about what it would take to be legally compliant as a scholarship granting organization for the federal tax credit, and then do some, if you're not already a 501c3 or an SGO in your state, looking into what the requirements are, often with the Secretary of State, for registering for charitable solicitation and registering to do business in your state. That's really the place to start, and thinking through your platform. And I know we've talked about so many things here, but really, I think the success of the program is going to come down to ensuring that we're providing the best support to as many students as possible and ensuring that the funds are flowing to eligible students regardless of where they're educating, right? This is for public school students, this is for private school students. So making sure that, I think my colleague said it best, right? That you're just sort of finding your space and complementing the efforts of whatever's going on in your state already.
Thank you. And Jackie, that kind of takes us into our closing question. But Sierra, did you have housekeeping for us?
We'll launch a poll in about 30 seconds if folks want to respond to that. But yes, we can jump
Okay.
into
Um,
closing thoughts.
So as we're rounding around, I think so much rich content and there's both what we know and what we're still waiting to hear. And so we understand that reality. But just wondering for our closing round, what advice you would give to the folks on this call about what they can do over the next few months to really learn and prepare. And Jackie, you'll have a chance to go again because you started directing us in that direction. But as you're just closing, like what from what you've heard in this call or from where you sit, just what advice would you give to folks who are really trying to either figure out whether to explore becoming or partner or just prepare for what's coming next in this moving landscape. Chris, I'm going to go round robin across my screen. So I'm just curious. Let's start with you. We'll go same order as we kicked off.
Well, the advice I'm taking for myself is to be ready to not miss the train should it come, so that we can ensure that kids have great opportunities available to them. And, I think along with that, depending on who you are in that ecosystem, are you ready to take on the demands of becoming an SGO? Could you work with an existing one? So there are a lot of ways to answer that question about not missing the train. You'd hate to miss an opportunity like this if your state is not yet opted in and chooses to in the next 9 months or so. I think having more discussions like this and considering the known consequences and benefits, but then imagining the unintended ones will prepare you as well as possible for this moment.
Right. Don't miss the train. And also, it's going to come through the station on an annual basis. There may be states that don't opt in right now that might opt in the future. Brent. Okay, come off mic for me. I saw the big muse.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was going to say, can you ask the question again?
Just what advice would you give for the folks who've been listening today on this call about how to prepare themselves over these next few months?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if it's so much about preparing yourself as opposed to preparing the state or the environment. My thought with is this: if you're not at the table, you're on it. And so for whatever the sector is that's important to you, be it communities and families, parochial private schools, out of school time programs, whatever it is, I think there's a great opportunity to engage with state leaders, governors, administrations, about what implementation is going to look like in your state or what requirements are going to look like in your state. And so I think it's imperative that you are at the table to help shape what that's going to look like. Otherwise, it'll be done to you as opposed to being done with you.
Don't miss the train. Don't be on the table. Mike.
Yeah, I would say as you take a look at this as well in your role, is this mission focused for you, right? How does it fit in? Because this will be a tremendous amount of work. I think what folks forget is the money's not just going to show up. These are individual gifts from individual donors. Do you have that infrastructure to reach out to individual donors? Is that in place for you? And is this mission creep or is it aligned with what you're doing? If not, then I would say then is there a partner that comes we talked about that you can connect with? There would be a scholarship granting organization and you can be a partner in that work or a provider. So I would say, keep an eye on those things. Does it fit within and do you have that capacity to jump into that?
Great. Jackie.
Yeah, three things. One, talk about this thing. Talk about it as much as possible. Talk about it at dinner parties, not just in the same ecosystem we always talk about it with our colleagues, right? Get the word out about it. Find out which of your state agencies is really holding this initiative. Like I said, I've spoken with departments of ed. I've spoken with secretaries of state. So find out which state agency is really holding this in your state, and then find your grassroots advocacy group. Somebody in your state is breathing this and living this every day and thinking about it. So if you're looking for partnership, that's a really good place to start, especially those that work with families and family advocacy.
Thank you, Jackie. Donna.
Yeah, I just have, first of all, everybody had great suggestions. I have two that are slightly different just from our state's experience now. The one is if you have a pro public education governor, don't just talk to them about opting in, but ask them to mobilize the infrastructure so that the people who are trying to use the tax credits for kids in public schools can be brought together for these conversations so they can implement really good solutions. I worked in our governor's office for 8 years for Ed Rendell. It would have been my job to bring these players to the table on behalf of public school kids. So ask your governor to do that because everybody's so dispersed. It's going to be really hard to do it. And the second thing is try and make sure you get language in your SGO statute or whatever your SGO rules that prohibit political contributions on the part of the staff or the board of anybody who is associated with the, well, not anybody, the board or the staff of the SGO. I will just say those two things from experience.
Uh, a reflection on this call. This has been in some ways one of the most nodding heads of the three calls that we've had, although you've come into this call from very different perspectives and different experiences in terms of the work. So just the understanding kind of the path forward and how we all find ways to make this happen in the kind of way that we are hoping really makes a difference for young people across the country and helps them get further faster and not setbacks. I think there's a real in an interesting way, just real kindred spirits in that work towards that vision. The other thing I just want to mention quickly as I turn back over to Sierra is we had talked about having another webinar in end of April, more around kind of mobilization and communications, what's it going to take, and then talked about it and just we need to see more what the it is a little bit, and let's like get through to early summer, see the rules, and then kind of bring back the how do we understand that together, kind of a greatest hits conversation, and then be able to have something just as kind of drumbeat as we get through the rest of this year to explore some of the different aspects of this conversation that came up today. So nothing right now in April, but more of there will be one probably within a week or two of the rules coming out, and just stay posted and we'll let y'all know.
Yes, thank you.
Sierra.
And on that note too, I just put my email in the chat because we're always open to our attendees' thoughts and ideas and questions and reflections. So if you either had a question that wasn't answered or if you have any ideas or any reactions to this, please feel free to send me an email and I will either note it or get back to you or both or all. But again, really, really, really wanted to thank our panel that was with us today. Donna, Brent, Chris, Mike, and Jackie were all excellent. I know that our attendees agree. We had great retention through the conversation, and obviously our Q&A of where did we end? I'm going to say over 30 questions.
And we
Was
promise
telling.
we will capture those not just to inform our future webinars, but like if you're developing a toolkit, Mike, or you're developing resources, like we will share out the Q&A with everybody that was on this call as well. Or if you're doing things in your own work and you'd like to just see what those are to help sharpen what people are developing for the path forward.
Definitely. Yes.
Thank you for the
So
questions.
yeah, definitely. So thank you all for that. And like Marita said, we'll be sure to share those out. And Marita, thank you for leading everyone through the discussion. I know it's a lot of heavy material and a lot to kind of comb through and make sense of. And you did a great job kind of navigating us. So thank you, all of you,
Thank you all.
for your contributions. With that, like Marita said, stay tuned. We don't have anything on the agenda yet for a next conversation in the series. Obviously, we have to wait and see what we can say and when we're able to say it. But do keep an eye out. Obviously, we have a newsletter that we would love for you all to subscribe to keep an eye on that. And then we also will be sending out a follow-up email this Friday. That'll include the recording, the slides, the bios, the resources, so that you can talk to your friends at the dinner table and say, hey, listen to this great topic. But anyway, thank you again. And on that note, too, we do have a few upcoming webinars. I know we have a coming soon slide, so let me share that real quick. Oh, there we go. My colleague beat me to it. But yes, we do have a few coming soon slides. Oh, there we go. Coming soon sessions. Next week, we hope you'll join us on the 31st to wrap up the month of March. Join us again at 3 p.m. for a discussion on how Mississippi achieved literacy success for students through smart implementation. On April 7th, we'll have a doubleheader starting with a peer exchange on out of the box ideas, how United Way partners are changing the lives of Alice families and communities. And at April 7th at 3 p.m., new pathways through schools, understanding virtual schools in today's K through 12 landscape. So if you liked today's conversation, chances are you'll probably like something that's coming up as well. But I think that's it for us. Thank you again, everyone, and thanks to all in the chat who are sharing their excitement about the conversation. Really appreciate that, and stay tuned for the follow-up and more information. Thank you all.
Thank you all.